Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Sports Community live stream. For those that have not joined us before on the live stream, my name's Steve Pallas. I'm the the founder and CEO of Sports Community. For those that have been on the live streams for a long period of time, will know that I've got a wife and three daughters, and they all but one, are heavily involved and very much love the game of netball. So it was interesting when Netball Australia announced during the week that they were going to introduce some rule changes to the way that netball, to the way they played their Suncorp Super Netball League. So Super Netball is the top level of netball in Australia, and for some reason or other, it seems to dominate my TV every day that it is on, in a way that football is not allowed to in a house full of three girls and a wife. So I was really interested when Netball Australia announced a new rule changes where there would be a 2-point shots in goals from long range shots from around the ring in certain times of the quarter. And I guess I'm an avid netballer, a netball follower. That would be fair to say. All jokes aside about my family, I thought, well, that's a really good innovation. It's a really good way to test the skills of the players, and I thought it was going to add a certain level of interest. And it was interesting. I've spent my life in change management, growing up, if you like, from out of uni into financial services, customer service, into change management, all the way up to overseeing mergers and acquisitions, then over into the CEO level. Very much change management is what we do. And at Sports Community, particularly, change management is what we do. And one of the key parts of change management is consultation with the people that are going to be affected by the change. Often people think that we need to consult to get their input on to get the best outcome. But really, the consultation process has two real real objectives. One, to get all the different perspectives of the change we're going to make and make sure that we've got everyone's opinion. But two, and most importantly, by engaging people early in the process, what we're doing is setting up a really strong platform to implement the change at the back end. So I was really fascinated. I have been very fascinated over the COVID period about the different leadership styles by the leagues, different sports, etc. And Peter V'landys and NRL is being held out to be a bit of a dictatorship and pull along. But even at the NRL, Peter V'landys and the NRL have created a subcommittee, Project Apollo, who's really working on the nuts and bolts, consulting with different stakeholders within the sport, and allowing that sport to move very, very quickly. So it was interesting when Netball made their announcement, not knowing what the process had been with the consultation onto what, to me, on the surface, sounded like a really good rule change. But the one thing I do know about change management is people's response to change is always unpredictable. It's the thing I love about it. And I wouldn't expect that the netball administrators would be loving the response that key people in the industry have put out. So Caitlin Bassett, the Australian captain, has come out very critical of that and made an Instagram post commenting about the change. Another ex-player, very experienced Australian player in Catherine Thwaites, has come out and really been very, very critical. I'll just go down to the quote because I don't like to use media articles too much, but I do like to use direct quotes. And Catherine says, I've lost my point. Catherine says, quote, and she said this via Twitter, players are not being consulted over the biggest rule change netball has seen is terrible. Right. So no one has commented on whether the rule change is terrible or not. What they're commenting on at the moment is the fact that they were not consulted and not included in the discussions and in the decision making. And if we go back to an earlier live stream that we talked about when Melbourne Storm went and asked to train, or they assumed that they could relocate their training from Melbourne to Albury, they notified the Albury City Council early in the week, I'll say on a Monday or Tuesday, the date exactly eludes me. The council meeting was, say, on the Wednesday or the Thursday, and council knocked it back, primarily on health reasons. But the next day on ABC News Breakfast TV, in an interview between Paul Kennedy, the sports commentator, and one of the councillors, one of the reasons that the council gave was we weren't consulted. We were just given this is what we want to do, or this is what we are going to do. And so one of the reasons he said that they knocked back the decision is because they weren't consulted, or they didn't have enough time to consider what it really meant in their community. So I think this is an important lesson for everybody. Sue, welcome to you. Good morning to you. For those that are on, have you got experiences where kind of you've made a change, a good change, and it's gone a little bit haywire in the implementation? Because that's one of the things that we're finding at the moment is that this now is a time for strong leadership and swift action, but there is still really, really that need to consult with the people that are going to be affected by the change. And so what we need to do is make sure that when the changes are announced, that the expectation and the reality are the same. And so then we don't get this sort of conflict. So that's I think a really important lesson that we can learn from the netball release of this. As Catherine Thwaite says, some of the most significant rule changes in the last 20, 30 years, probably since they went from 9 players down to 7. And so to not consult with the players has taken the focus and made it so much more difficult to implement, because now the attention's got to be on placating the players and getting them on board. And so the positiveness of the rule change, well, I see it as a positive, but it's just an opinion, doesn't matter. But the rule change and what they expected was going to be a really positive effect, because they'd made the rule change to improve the quality of the game, was the reasoning behind the rule change. That has all been lost now because of the challenges that are going to be taking place, or having to get the key group, which is the players, on board with this rule change. So with a little bit of consultation, that's not right. With consultation, hopefully these sort of scenarios can be avoided, and you can just move smoothly through into the implementation stage. So effectively what's happening for netball is they're now doing the consultation stage, or it's gone from consultation to conciliation. Deb, welcome to you. Change for change's sake has been something I have outside of the club, and it hasn't gone well. No consult, no planning or organisation around it. If there are benefits, it's a little easier to stomach, but change for the sake of change can appear ego-driven. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's right. And one of the things about consultation processes, and why we use them extensively in our strategic planning process, is because what it does is part of that process is educating people about the situation right now, the issue that that is potentially being looked at to be addressed. Because one of the things that people look at when they look at what the change is they're coming from their position of knowledge and information, which may not be, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it may not actually be informed on what it is that they're trying to achieve. And but there's also that people don't like change and they take it as an offensive if it's not being pushed back. So no consultation, even if there's two reasons, as I said at the start, to get all the different perspectives of all the different stakeholders. And again, if we were consulting for a change like this, if you think about the perspectives, you've got the referees, you've got the players, you've got the broadcasters, you've got the coaches, you've got at least there's 4 or 5 different groups just straight up that would potentially all have a different perspective on that one topic that's being looked at. And those different perspectives are really important for creating the best outcome, or being the most informed that you can be to create a good outcome. But more importantly, I think more importantly in change management, is that it sets up the implementation at the back end. So no consultation, no planning, and for me, no communication. If you're going to do something that's controversial, then one of the things is, and this is why a number of sports leak things out a lot earlier than the announcement, so that they can get that public feedback, that angst out of the way before they make the announcement. Susanna, good morning to you. Very surprised players were not consulted before the announcement. Perhaps that was the strategy: announce first and reconcile after. Announce first, reconcile after. We see that strategy actually being used a lot, and I really don't know of too many times where it's ultimately been the most efficient way to implement a change. It's not something that I would recommend at all, because at some stage you've got to reconcile, to use your terminology. It's much easier to reconcile when everyone's on the same page and discussing a concept, rather than reconciling with a group of people that's absolutely angry, frustrated, got different agendas to the rule change. Because the agenda is not just the rule change, but it's the process that led up to the rule change that potentially said that they weren't consulted. Now, I don't know whether the players were or were not consulted, and that's just what I'm picking up from the direct quotes from a few players that have come out in the media. So Netball Australia may have done a really strong consultation process, and the backlash is just a normal backlash from a traditionalists as rules change and evolve. And we saw this, and again, not being critical, we saw this, the traditionalists really push back against the introduction of T20 cricket when it started. And the traditionalists like the rules and the games the way they are, and they like it and they don't want to change. And that's their position, and that's absolutely okay. So I would be very surprised as well, Susanna, if Netball Vic hadn't done some consultation with a very experienced chairperson as at the helm of the Super League. So very, very, very surprised I would be. And if they haven't, they're going to be paying the consequence for it for a number of weeks to come, which is going to be this sort of discussion, which is not overly positive, where one group's fighting against the other. So my point of this session is not to be critical of Netball Australia. My point of this session, like all things that we talk about in the live stream, is something's happened. What can we learn from it? And the learning from today's session is that no consultation if you're looking to implement change. Inevitably, from my significant experience and some of it living this trying to push through change, where there hasn't been consultation or where I haven't consulted well enough. So we'll put that down to bitter experience. Typically, change pushed through without consultation ends in varying degrees of frustration, challenge. But what it does end up in is an extended implementation period that you can be doing it a lot quicker, a lot more easily, a lot more positively than what potentially happens when we don't consult. So that's where I'm up to. Tomorrow, we've been doing a lot of talking. Our eSport Friday has raised the eyebrows of quite a few people within the industry. And we've had a number of discussions with people within the eSport industry about coming on board and being able to share their knowledge and experience to our audience. So I really look forward to eSport Friday every week. Next week, we'll start to really bring back the guests. It's been a bit of a head down, bum up couple of weeks for us doing webinars and training programs, etc. So guests will start to come back next week. Next week, we'll be able to make some really exciting announcements about a Vic Health program for the live streaming, where we're going to introduce a series of 5 live streams, case studying clubs that are doing sport differently. So I'm really excited about the live streams in the future. So hopefully you are. Thanks for joining us, Sue and Deb and Susanna. Thank you very much for joining the conversation. For those that join the conversation after the live stream, I love that as well. And I will make sure that I comment during the day on your posts as well. So until tomorrow, eSport Friday, I'm Steve Pallas. Thank you very much for being part of our sports community. Thanks.